You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Hi, everyone. It is Steven Schleicher, and I just wanted to give you a heads up that Critical Hit is officially on winter break. We will return with a new episode right after the new year, January, whatever that is. You can look it up on your calendar. And I just wanted to say, I hope you have a great holiday, whichever holiday or holidays that you celebrate. We are at Major Spoilers forever grateful that you're part of what we do and that you're enjoying everything happening with our current game of Octoon Cthulhu. What's going to happen next? Well, the party's going to head to Arkham. Going to be interesting as secrets are going to be revealed, horrors will appear, and we're going to see who's going to crack first. I'll give you a hint. It's probably the GM. Anyway, have a great holiday. If you want more Critical Hit character sheets, etc., head over to our Patreon page. Maybe you'd like to give us a little something for the holiday. Maybe give yourself a little something for the holiday as well. Sign up for a full year of in advance, and you will get access to character sheets and updates and Critical Hit a week early if you are at the silver level or higher, and so much more. It's at patreon.com/major spoilers. Patreon.com/major spoilers is the place you want to go. Thank you again. And as we head into the holiday break, here's a mailbag episode. Take care now. Welcome to Critical Hit, a Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. Instead of your regularly planned gaming session, we're bringing you this Critical Hit special presentation. Yeah. We're doing a mailbag, something we haven't done in years. It's been years, literally, since we've done it. And what kicked it off was an actual letter that came in my inbox that now I have, now that I have lost. But let me find it really quick. Let's see. Confirm your account. No, I don't want to confirm my account. All right, here we go. This is this is from Xavier. And Xavier says, hello, I'm currently on episode 478. And the crew is talking about the dwarf god Auradon in the Astral Sea. My question is, has Rodrigo played Skyrim? Seems like a lot of his environments are influenced by it. The constructs that recently attacked the party are just like the dwarven steam guardians in Skyrim. Anyway, I love the podcast, and I'm so glad Randus is able to hit these days. Critical Hit inspired me to start playing D&D, and now I have been a DM for a year and a half. So very good, Xavier. Congratulations. 478, man, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time
Sorry
ago.
we ruined your life,
So
by the
long
way.
ago.
What was happening? in
Rodrigo,
478?
were you playing Skyrim back in 478?
I probably was playing Skyrim before that.
This would have been November 9th, 2018.
Yeah, Skyrim is probably a very minor influence, just because, we were already, I want to say we were already chugging on the Void Saga when Skyrim came out. Maybe not.
Yes. We were.
So, ancient automatons are definitely a trope. I wasn't thinking of those guys specifically.
That's
the thing is
a Legend of Zelda thing too.
Yeah, I don't actually know that I've done that quest line in Skyrim because I think they're mostly optional. So I don't remember if like the main quest actually had you go into the ancient dwarven ruins with the robots. So yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think it was a super huge influence, but it's all in there, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Texura says, how would you compare the 2D20 system of Achtung Cthulhu to the other game systems you've played? I actually like it better than most of the other systems we've played, only because the maths are much simpler.
Yeah.
And I'm going to save the rest of my answer for another question that's coming up.
I feel like the precision of knowing this is a difficulty 3 and I have X number and I can use these to get an additional chance. I feel like that's a positive, but I'm also one of those players who the more mathematical crunch there is to the system, the more my brain goes, la 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 la, I'm not listening, la 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 la. So it's a mixed bag for me.
Yeah. Rob?
I like Matthew's point there, like the whole having knowledge of what my target is means getting to utilize my resources. It's about utilizing my resources more effectively as opposed to anything else that the mechanical aspect of these are. I also am always a fan of systems that have a attribute and skill that aren't where the skills aren't tied directly to a specific attribute every time.
Mm-hmm. Although we end up using the same 4 skills pretty much all the time. A
lot of them use the same ones, but like athletics can easily be agility or brawn without any
without taking a feat, right?
Right.
Yeah, and most of these skills could easily be applied to at least 2 different one of the attributes without.
And there's enough.
Hesitating.
I think there's enough space. Again, I think providing, depending on your GM, that you can make an argument of, and we've done that several times in the game, where Matthew will say, "Can I use this and this instead of this and this?" And sometimes it's a yes, and sometimes it's a no. But I think that there's that leeway of, sneaking around and being stealthy, and what attributes are you specifically doing this, as opposed to, do I have to use persuasion and this, or can I use persuasion and something else? I think that kind of leeway in the system also helps out as well.
And it allows you to do things with character creation, because I'm reminded of an issue of X-Men just a couple of years ago. There are like 5 mutants in a room, and somebody comes in and they're interrogating her. She walks out, and all 5 of them say she was lying. And then each of them, because of their powers, one's a telepath, one can sense her pheromones, one can see, the fluctuations of the air around her, one reads her micro expressions, one is literally listening to her heartbeat, and they all know she's lying, but they're all having that same thing from different storyline or different flavory ways of doing it. So it allows you to have a character who is, kind of a weird off-brand guy, but also still have that same ability without saying, okay, we need to have this guy and we have to have a medic and we have to have a cleric,
Okay, so that we'll have a follow-up question on that in just a moment as well, Matthew. Rodrigo, do you have some thoughts on the 2D20 system? And it's not necessarily Achtung Cthulhu, because Modiphius has a whole bunch. What's that bunker post-apocalyptic game that people are into? Fallout. Fallout has a 2D20 system. Their Star Trek uses a 2D20 system. They have a Conan 2D20 system.
Or they did.
I was going to say, isn't the post-apocalyptic bunker system working in a call center, I think, is what it is.
Maybe. Rodrigo, what are your thoughts on the 2D20 system?
So in my limited experience with it, which is just this game of Achtung Cthulhu, I think it's less swingy, right? So if you're comparing it to just a D20 game like D&D, you can get these like huge swings in what a character can do. The 2D20 system, I think, sort of stabilizes that a little bit. But I think because of specifically the way that you start out as a character, it usually stabilizes it like not to your advantage, at least early on.
Mhm.
Like it's a
Mhm.
lot easier to miss, and it's a lot easier to fail, I think.
And I think that
than
depends
in
on the difficulty level.
Yeah, and I think a single D20 game, it's just like it's like you're just as likely to have these like huge rolls as you are to botch something that you're supposed to be good at.
Right.
Silver Spoon fan says, what about rolling for damage? Would you prefer not to have any black sides on the damage dice? As the GM, I say yes, but I also understand that, I guess that is frustrating where it's like, hey, this man stabs you with his knife and now he's going to roll damage. Oh, and this happened, I think, just recently in one of the games we played where it's like, oh, he takes a shot at you or, oh, he stabs you and you take 0 damage off of that, even though you're not wearing any armor whatsoever. And so that is a little bit of a disconnect in, I think there should always be some at least minimum damage that happens even when you have blanks on your dice. But I mean, that could be one of those bits where it's unpredictable in the system, right? Where suddenly it's like, oh, you think you're going to die, and fortunately the dice swing your way, and there is no damage taken.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I do feel like that a hit should be like damage. Maybe like there should be like a static amount of damage plus so many dice.
Mm-hmm.
Just to something like that.
Yeah. What do you think of the momentum system, and how it works?
I mean, I dig the momentum system. I feel like that really is what gives it the fun, pulpy flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah. It's like again, I don't play nearly as many games as Brian because, my God, how could you? But more importantly, it gives these game sessions their own sort of feel. Like when you're playing a game, but it's the same as the other game, but it has a pop-o-matic bubble. It feels different. Sorry and Parcheesi are basically the same game. It's just the direction of your board, and ping pong is basically net elevated tennis played while standing on the board. And you put that whole thing together. I feel like having that ability to go, hey, we have this momentum. Rob did something really great, and now anybody in the group can use Rob's good fortune to the group's advantage. That's kind of nice. I feel like that gives us a little balance that sometimes was frustrating when playing 4th edition.
Right. And to build upon that, I think that there are so many options for momentum spins that even though everybody has the chart in front of them, sometimes you get into the groove of, oh, well, I'm going to use momentum just to buy extra die, right? Whereas you can actually use momentum to add more damage dice. Or, as Matthew and I were discussing this week, you can actually use momentum to allow one side or the other to continue the attack. So, like, Matthew can do an attack, and then Rodrigo can say, well, I want to use a momentum so that I can do an attack right after Matthew, and the enemy skips its turn. Now, the enemy's eventually going to take their turn, but it just pushes them back lower in the list. And so there's things that I still think that momentum, your players probably get into the habit of using specific things without remembering that there's other things those momentum and fortune and other things can do.
Right.
Do you like using momentum, Rodrigo?
I don't love it. I think that it works backwards from what I would want. I think that when things are going well, you get more momentum. And when things are going badly and you'd really need some kind of clutch mechanic to like turn things around, you're out of momentum. And, I mean, you can always give the game master threat, but I would almost prefer that was the only thing there was, just giving the game master more threat. And you're right, there are probably things that we could be spending momentum on, but again, when we get going and things are going badly, you burn through your momentum pretty quick. We need to spend it for our rolls to hit. It's like we can't press the advantage if we don't generate an advantage. And again, if things are not going well, then more momentum isn't coming in.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank goodness we figured out what a first aid kit does.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew
Brian or
what it did.
Rob?
I just thought I had to use it with a specific skill.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I can push
Rob,
this
do you
button.
like the momentum system?
I like group resources like that.
Yeah.
Rodrigo does make a good point about it being very having
Like
the opposite. Yeah, like the better you're doing, the more you get, which means you're going to continue to do better and better. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of do feel like a system wants the opposite. You're doing poorly. Here's this bonus luck to be able to like utilize to get out of things.
I think that's
but-
when I think that's when you're supposed to use your fortune, is when you're really down on your luck kind of thing, to really swing things the other way. I mean, you guys have been using, I think, fortune the right way, but I think ideally when things look like they're darkest, that's when the pulp hero, pulls the magic rabbit out of his hat with a fortune and really turns the game around that way.
Yes, and I'm not saying that other game systems aren't exploitable, but
Right.
the win more situation applies to fortune as well. If I'm flush with momentum, I can just spend a fortune and then a bunch of momentum and then just generate potentially even more momentum by guaranteeing some successes, right? So you can't, like, again, if you've already got the forward motion, I mean, literally I've like, we've done that in the past to try and generate some momentum of like,
right,
this is an easy roll. I'll spend just a difficulty one. I spend a fortune. We already have one momentum coming. Let's try to get another one, type of situation, which I don't think is what they want you to spend fortune on, right? They don't want you to spend fortune to keep the main resource like at a usable level. They want you to spend it on like big exciting moments.
Yeah, like punch the Shoggoth in the face, and that's what you need to knock it out or whatever.
Yeah.
Silver Spoon Fan also says, why didn't you guys wear armor in the Glass Museum heist? There was no armor available. I think there was the one armor that Brian had.
Well,
but he's not the one that needed the armor.
Yeah, it's like armor is visible, and that's the thing with like modern games. It's like if you're playing D&D, maybe nobody bats an eye at somebody walking into a tavern fully armored and with a sword, because it's dangerous out there. There's like trolls and stuff. But in a modern game in which people aren't aware of like the major threat, which is monsters in the shadows, and sometimes those monsters are Nazis. Showing up at a museum wearing like a tactical vest, at least at that point in history in that country, was weird. I think nowadays in the United States, people could show up at a museum with a tactical vest and they'd be like, "Oh, it's one of those guys."
Yeah. I think, and so
into my local
I think
7-Eleven.
I think we also do the game maybe I don't want to say drastically different than what I've seen other people play it, because other people so in your group, you guys are being sent out on these missions, oftentimes having to do a lot of stealth and blend in with the environment type stuff.
Yeah.
This isn't always the case, because I've read through all the different modules and game things that you can do. A lot of the other stuff is you're essentially Badger's commandos.
Yeah, you're in the front
paratrooping
lines.
in. Yeah, you're paratrooping into this Nazi nest of deadites, and you got to kill them all. And that's fun, but it seems like a lot of those kind of missions that I've seen people are playing are, okay, go invade this nest of deadites. Great, congratulations. There's now a bunch of fish people that you got to go punch in the face. Go do that. Now go and take out this Black Sun group. And it's not kind of the way I've set up the game.
Yeah.
So, the other question the Silver Spoon Fan says, do you wish you had started with a magician?
Not really. I kind of like us kind of discovering the occult stuff as we go and not being pretty clueless to it.
And that is somewhat by design too, because save for Brian and myself, I don't know that everyone else is super into the Lovecraft lore. And so being able to just kind of be a normal bunch of people who are now introduced to the Lovecraft mythos and all of these things, I think gets watered down a little bit if you have a magician that's like, yes, I already know about magic and how to do all these things and the Necronomicon and all that stuff. So that, I think, is maybe a little bit of a good thing for maybe this group of people. But I was surprised that nobody wanted to do a magician.
I would agree. I mean, I always wish we had a magician. I mean,
technically you guys did have a magician, but he got killed in the very first episode. So
right, and that happens. And, for a while we had the magician, future magician in chief, I guess the allied commanding magician. But I also feel like the way you pitched this game didn't feel to me like it wanted a magician. Because you're like, I want to do this and this, and I'm not going to tell people what your pitch was because they can.
Because I've already told people. No, I've already told people that it's Indiana Jones meets Cthulhu. And that's the thing. Yeah.
And literally everything that I know about Cthulhu, I learned from being on a podcast with Stephen for the last 765 years. But I also feel like there's that level of. When we started this game, I was just like, okay, I don't necessarily feel like I'm the guy for a historical, but I also felt like the game needed to have, these characters needed to have that basis. Like you mentioned, of these are just a bunch of guys. They need to be exposed to this whole thing and basically be our grandfathers. Except for now they're dealing with the freaky deaky things that hide in the shadows. And I felt like trying to pitch a wizard into that would have felt a little bit like, oh, yeah, I totally want to play in your game, but only if I can play Blackie Lawless. And, that's not necessarily as much fun. Although playing Blackie Lawless would be kind of fun.
Rob, what were you going to say about magicians?
I'm kind of in agreement with Matthew. Like, almost all of my Cthulhu knowledge is from hanging out with you and or Brian. So like just being able to having a character that might have that knowledge and not having that knowledge at all myself would have been very difficult at best. But then just the whole premise of what we were doing felt like the premise of the pitch when we were asking for characters definitely felt more of a, hey, we're going to go into this blind. We want characters discovering things. And that also just helps for the general show aspect of what we're doing as well, of like, at least some of us need to be discovering this. Probably the majority of us need to be discovering information. So having our characters discover it is also helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if everybody knew that there were Shoggoths roaming through the countryside, I think that would, from the character perspective, I think that would kind of maybe ruin a little bit of the world. Whereas 90% of every Lovecraft thing I've read is all, suddenly this man upstairs is complaining about his air conditioning not working and how he's always too hot until one day I go in and he's basically melted away because I couldn't get his air conditioner working correctly. And wow, that was weird. Kind of stuff. Or even if you're reading like Herbert West, I mean, that's an actual story, right? Or like Herbert West and suddenly discovering this fluid that he's trying to use to reanimate people, or, some meteorite crashes in a well and look at the weird things that it's doing around those people. It's not like they knew what it was doing. They all had to go through a path of discovery. I guess. So had we not started this game before the U.S. entered World War II, because we're really starting it even before. I mean, at this point in 1939, Germany's done what it's done to Eastern Europe, but they really haven't invaded France yet, although that is coming up very soon. And I feel like it's the crossing over into France is the thing that really kicks off World War II, right? Because that's when Germany begins a big bombing campaign against Great Britain. That's when Italy suddenly decides that it wants to enter. That's when Germany starts to
That's really what
claim
makes it a
parts of
world
Africa.
war.
Yeah. And so had this game started after 1940, I think I probably could have pushed somebody to say, hey, the USA has this thing called Majestic, and maybe you want to be part of their psychic research team. Maybe that's the kind of magic that you want to go into. And then the other thing is that because, I wasn't forcing anyone to be from a specific country that's involved in that so that they could all start in the same, essentially, tavern. But this time it's the same military group. A lot of the magic in Achtung Cthulhu is either like Norwegian, Scandinavian type magic, where you're using runes and that kind of stuff, or you're using some kind of a cultish dark magic that would be more Germanic, or you're using in the USA more psychic abilities. And so I think not having a magician did work out in a way. Although, again, I was really surprised that Brian didn't pick up magician. And now he's a magician. So there you go.
Yay.
Any other thoughts on magicians or magic? I mean, we really haven't. We're just getting into the magic part. The other thing that I'm kind of glad nobody did magic is there's a whole chapter devoted to magic. And even though Brian and I have exchanged plenty of emails and I kind of described it during the show, a couple of people have written in going, can you please explain that again? Because it seems weird. And it's like, it takes a little bit to get used to. So
you haven't had to memorize that chapter yet because nobody needs to know it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Cosmo Memory says, I was wondering, what do you do to keep things moving in such a long running game? I sometimes struggle with feeling that a campaign session I'm running feels too much like filler, especially if the week hasn't been kind enough to grant me time to write or plan as such. So I'm interested in how you make each individual session remain compelling over a long story arc. Oh, Cosmo Monkey, I know exactly where you're coming from. Hey, did you notice that this was a mailbag episode? So here, Rodrigo, why don't you answer this, and then we'll swing over to Brian since he's also run a pretty long campaign.
Yeah, if you don't have time to plan the campaign, then you can't mystically conjure things that are going to be interesting. There are a few ways to cheat that, and that's to put things in front of the players that either their characters or the players themselves tend to be into, and that will get the players to generate some stuff. But the problem is that all that stuff you gotta do on your feet, right? Because you didn't necessarily plan for what was gonna happen. And then any changes to the campaign that result from that, you're gonna have to incorporate later, right? I think I've mentioned it before, probably online, not on Critical Hit, but if you guys remember that that game where the characters were on the boat and they started dealing with the will-o-wisps, that was completely improvised. I had not planned to do that ahead of time, and once I started introducing the wisps and you guys seemed interested in that, I just went for it.
We wisped
it, and I think it's a very memorable it was a very memorable session and a very memorable episode because everybody was into it. But yeah, so that was improvised, and that's what you can do. You can improvise, but then you're stuck with whatever you improvised.
Right. And sometimes that works out really well. For example, in as I was telling the players a couple of weeks ago when we finished that Shadows Over Section M, I was saying I knew who the bad guy was, but I didn't quite know all the clues that I wanted to give them. And people who've listened to the GM Roundtable already have heard a lot of this. But the minute Rodrigo grabbed the whiskey from the Brigadier's office, I was like, okay, that's the thing that should be a big clue that's trying to kill people. That's the thing that's going to hopefully help them. And then as everybody's doing their bit, I'm like, okay, what's the poison? Well, there's obviously somebody who's got medical background. Let's introduce the belladonna, the that Matthew's background, because his doc knows a bunch of homeopathic stuff, so he would know that that's a poison. And so then that starts to tie all those things together. And then the big question of, well, why isn't the general being affected by this. Because he's wearing this necklace. And so all of that was also improvised at that time. And I thought that kind of played out well in that bit. Brian, what are some tips that you have for running a long running game?
Basically, what I kind of tend to do is kind of take it session by session, determine like what scene do I really want to hit with the next session, and basically plan that out and kind of work back from there.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just kind of come up with your minimum viable product for the next session, and then use whatever time you have between then and the next session just to flesh out any other contingencies. Like, what happens if they don't go to where I want this session to be? Like, how does that play out? Plan alternate paths, flesh out the path to that scene that you want to hit. Like I say, just to kind of figure out what's the minimum thing you want, plan that, and then any extra time you get, flesh it out is my main method.
Yeah, for this, I kind of approached it kind of like what Brian's talking about, but I also, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And so I know that there are 8 artifacts that everybody has to go after at some point in the game. So each one of those is this arc that I've created. And so then inside those arcs, what are the things that I want to happen? What are the things that I can dangle in front of them to see if they'll veer off and go this direction, or, what's going to happen? But I know that I've broken it down at least into 8 major arcs for the elements that they have to get together. And I think that then helps with the longer planning of the longer running game. Now, there are things that happened in episode 1 that are just now paying off. So there is some of that stuff that you may have to start to thread together. And then there's things that your players may never stumble upon. I've mentioned again in the GM Roundtable that there are a couple of tree branches that I expected the players to do, but they didn't. So now I get to move that to another part. Or maybe those people that they never met are doing something in the background that affects the story later on. So I've got those kind of things to kind of play with as well.
Yeah, Rodrigo.
But I also think... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. At one point during some critical hit stuff, Rodrigo had said that he thinks of his planning as a series of stair steps or little islands where you're on the island and there's 4 or 5 places you can go. And depending on where you go, that eliminates some choices but opens up new ones. Mm-hmm. And I think that the one thing that I would say, I've never actually done a game for critical hit, but I've done some long running back in the day. I'm retired. But here's the thing. If you're going to play any game and you're going to do more than one session, you want to also remember that your players are your collaborators. And sometimes they'll have this great idea or a concept that you never considered or something that changes the nature of everything. Or, in the case of Randus, that one cosmic botch that he hit at, I think that may have been with the Triskelion. I don't even remember what it was now. All I remember is Rodrigo saying the words cosmic botch and literally, and literally the direction of Randus, the party, and the game had to change. I don't know what he may have or may have not planned from that point, but I know that everything that came after that could not have been exactly what he planned, because that one botch changed literally the nature of one of the core characters in the game. And at that point, that I think is something to keep in mind too, is if I'm trying to come up with an idea, or I have an idea, but it's not quite working. But, Brian at the end of the table is like, what I do really good? Mess up my rolls. If you have that,
leave it to me, boss.
That. Yeah.
But again, it's also things when you listen to players, and I think it was Matthew, but it could have been somebody else. Yes, probably. When somebody said, they were at the hotel in Paris, and somebody wanted to look at this register, and the man was like, "Oh no, we have big celebrities that are staying here. We can't do that." And then somebody said, "Oh, is it Clark Gable?" And then I was like, "Yeah, it's Clark Gable." And then that allowed me to then the next session or 2 sessions later get to the part where they have to rescue Clark Gable. And then when you go and do the research on it, which is maybe the thing that is a little bit different than this game than maybe some of the other games that we've played, is that there's a historical timeline that you don't have to follow exactly, but kind of fits into that. And so then when I was looking, I'm like, holy crap, Clark Gable was actually targeted by Germans. Yep. And then it's like, okay, that then makes this story a lot more believable then to people who are history people. So I don't know. Yeah. But, you know, the fact that somebody says, oh, Clark Gable is here. And I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if they have to do a rescue mission to get this person from point A to point B? Yeah. And there's a whole session for you. What were you going to say, Rodrigo?
I was going to say it's different from the Void Saga, but if you were running something in like Faerun or like Eberron, you'd still have to do research, because then people would like call in and be like, actually, there's a whole enclave of shifters that lives under that part of Char. And so
that is why there is a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode of Critical Hit that, of Punch Hole Nazis, is that, hey, we are working within this framework, but you know, if we don't have the dates exactly right, you know, don't get all bent out of shape over it. But there's also times where it's like, oh, it'd be cool to introduce this thing. Like there was a thing that I was going to introduce to you guys tonight if I had gotten all my stuff together. But then as I went back to make sure I had my dates right, this one particular person was kicked off the air 6 months before the current date of the game that you're playing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just not going to put that person in.
Darn it.
Just because it's outside of the date.
We don't get Sister Amy.
No. But it, without revealing a whole lot, I think you guys, and I've said before that all Nazis are monsters, but not all monsters are Nazis. And certainly in the last couple of sessions, as you have come to America, you can see that America isn't, you know, unclean and the whole anti-Semitism and Hitler-loving bits before we entered the war. There was a lot of Hitler-loving going on in the United States before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And so I kind of want to bring that in there, but I also don't want to go too far out of the narrative to where people are like, that's not believable, or that didn't happen, or those kinds of things. So
right. And it is tough, but that's, you know, that could be the thing with any game. As Rodrigo mentioned, you know, those moments of, well, you know, there's actually something that dealt with that. That is something that will come up. And if you have, you know, that player in your group, if you're, you know, you're saying, hey, I want to do this. And they're like, well, what about this thing that actually exists in this issue of Dragon that you didn't read from 1992? You can be the yes and guy and go, okay, give me that issue of Dragon and bring that in, but then also mess with
and then make them regret it. And then make them regret it. Yeah,
exactly.
And you're right. And I think Rodrigo is exactly right, because the minute you start doing Eberron or Baldur's Gate kind of stuff, I think there's people that are so into, and I don't know if you're one of those people, Rob, that are so into the mythos and the lore that's in the handbooks, that is, if you deviate from that, if you call that out or not.
No. Not the world is my sandbox, and I'm going to mess it up.
There you go.
You know, my daughter has
jokingly asked
with her cat.
Anth jokingly asks, which upcoming campaign will you use to tie all the Critical Hit games so far into a single multiverse or a universe? Yeah. Okay. Megatron Stu 46 says, having just started reading the Rivers of London RPG, I'm wondering, have any of you played or been tempted by a branded TTRPG, for example, Transformers, Marvel, etc.? Why or why not? And which ones have really attracted you, made you run screaming? What are the advantages, disadvantages of playing in a branded world? I know that there's they're redoing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG. The Marvel RPG has been out for a while now. In fact, the X-Men expansion, I think, Brian, just came out.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, there's Transformers, and I think there's a... if it's not
Power Rangers,
I was going to say Power Rangers, Avatar, the Last Airbender.
Oh yeah.
So obviously the advantages, I think, are hopefully everybody's already familiar with the IP. The disadvantages, I think, are everybody's very familiar with the IP.
Exactly. I played a long-running Star Wars game. Occasionally, you'll hear me tell my story about how at one point I was the favored pretty one of the game master, where he had a terrible crush on me, and so my character got away with murder in the game, literally to the point where you're in a Star Wars RPG, and I'm like, well, I don't want to play an existent Star Wars, people. I don't want to be like a Beep Borp or a guy with lizard heads or anything. So I sort of just made up my own race, and he let me, and we like reverse engineered this crystalline race of people based on something that is in the Star Wars universe. And it bugged the other players that I wasn't playing, a Twi'lek or a whatever people are, that I wasn't from Corellia or Tatooine or something. And that, for me, was half the fun, but also for the other players was an issue. So, it was a long running game that we had a lot of fun with, but the thing about those licensed properties is sometimes familiarity breeds contempt, where if you want to try and not necessarily break the rules, but if you want to do something that doesn't necessarily fit the narrative or the universe, or, if you wanted to do, say, Aliens, which we did in a Star Wars setting, it really does have, I feel like there are more pitfalls than just making it up or just flying through a Starfinder game, for instance. If you're like, hey, these are aliens and they got acid blood and they do this and they do that, and people are like, yeah, well, what about the Wookiees? I bet a Wookiee could kill them.
Rodrigo, you have thoughts?
So Matthew illustrates an interesting point in that it's like, oh, I made up these crystalline aliens from Star Wars, and I think a lot of us now would be like, okay, because they've just added more and more and more aliens to Star Wars. There's always more aliens in Star Wars, but
right.
It's a good illustration that in IPs that everybody knows, everybody has a different sort of internal contract with that property. And there are things about it that if that contract is broken, they're very hard to accept. So you can be like, yeah, let's all play the Serenity RPG, and somebody might be sitting there and they're like, well, I hardly feel like a defeated Confederate soldier in space.
Yeah.
While we're playing this with all the shooting and all the space barbarians and stuff, which is part of the setting, but if it's not the part of the setting that you're interested in, or if it's not something that your idea of what the show should be jives with, it can, or the game should be, it can cause you problems.
No,
is there also
was
a problem?
From Buffy. That's a different.
Is there also a problem, like if you're playing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, RPG, not like a tactical game or something, video game like that, but somebody's going to be mad because they don't get to be Donatello, and that person doesn't get to be Leonardo, or that also traps you into, well, I guess I have to act like Mikey the entire time. I think there's that, and I think it would be the same way with doing a Marvel game where you are playing Spider-Man or Captain America. And as you said, Rodrigo, your contract might be, I know Spider-Man is stronger than Captain America, or whatever nonsense you're going to have in your head, that is not going to jive with what you're doing.
I think the biggest problem with that is these more structured RPGs where you get into things where, like, even if you can like get the character sheets from the back of the book or whatever, and it's like, here's exactly what Donatello's stats are. It's like the mechanics of the game are going to ruin that. Yeah. I think today, every day, there's like thousands of people across like Discords and emails and hanging out together that just like actually just straight up role play these characters.
Yeah.
And they're unburdened by the rules, and they just, use like character based interactions. And it's like, those People are kind of doing it right when you are looking at the IP. If it is just like, this is literally, I knew a guy who was like, this is Ubart Thoms, this is like Reverse Flash's Twitter, ask me anything, right?
Yeah.
And like, people would show up and be like, "Hey, Reverse Flash, how do you feel about this?" It's like, I hate it. I imagine, because he's bad,
Right? Because he does hate everything.
Yeah.
Rob, do you have any
Spider-Man, by
thoughts
the
on,
way, is much
IP?
stronger than Captain America.
Yeah, of course.
By time.
That's what I'm saying. But there's somebody out there that's going, and I'll open up Spider-Man versus Captain America number 27 and show you that you're wrong. Rob, what do you think of IP-based RPGs?
I don't like the ones like the way you described, where you're explicitly playing this character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of the fun of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG is the random character generation.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, what mutant animal ability do you have?
A lot, apparently. But no, so yeah, any of them where you're like, yeah, you get to RP as Spider-Man. It's like, nah, that's not what I want to do. I want to be in that world with my friends. 2, everybody playing needs to be on the same page as to how movable the world is.
Yeah, how canon
or how mutable it is. Yeah, how much canon is going to exist and how much isn't. I played in a Star Wars one where managed to absolutely decimate. Were you in that one? Either Brian or Rodrigo should have also been in this one. It was either Bosk or Vader. Like, we just absolutely destroyed them through a series of circumstances, and because it was set before episode 4,
right? It changed the timeline.
It would have changed the timeline, so the DM said, "Nah, he's still alive. You guys get away."
Boo.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, that's I would like to play a Star Wars game. And even though Brad worked on the Star Wars RPG, I don't think he wants to run it for whatever reason. Although he will bring over his not Modifius, his Fantasy Flight Star Wars board game and make us play that forever. Which was fun. But if I were to play a Star Wars game, I would be like, okay, there can be the Empire and there can be stormtroopers, but I don't want to encounter Darth Vader. I don't want to encounter Luke Skywalker. I want to be in this weird world where we're just smugglers and we have to go get something and bring it back, and we have to navigate that stuff, and we run into bad people that want to take our stuff. What's that, Rob?
Story that Brian and I had worked on for ages because of a mispronunciation of the board game Carcassonne.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go. All right. But I mean, that's what I would do in an IP thing is I don't want to be Spider-Man or Captain America. I want to be, Blork Man who, can transform into amorphous jelly and slip through any crack. Can I do that in your game? No. Well, then I probably am not interested.
That actually weirdly takes a lot of conversations. And that's actually true of any game, any like sort of published game world. And actually, I guess even dreamt up game worlds by the game master is that, but especially with IPs, because the main storyline becomes this like strong canonical through line, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you are playing a Star Wars game, then necessarily your characters kind of aren't the ones that blow up the Death Star. If your characters are the ones that blow up the Death Star, then you kind of have to like sit down and explain like, well, what happened to all the other guys, right?
Yeah, then you have to do a whole tag and bink thing.
Yeah, and you might have to be like, okay, well, you guys get to blow up this other thing that's kind of like the Death Star, and it's like, well, good luck in coming up with something that's as cool as a planet-sized like starbase that it blows up other planets. Literally, they couldn't. They just did it again for the sequel trilogy. Like, right? It's like it puts a lot of pressure on
Return
you
of the Jedi.
to be like, yeah. Not only did they do it twice in the original trilogy, they did it again, right? So, and then they half did it in Rogue One. So actually, it's kind of it puts you in a difficult position. It's like, oh yeah, well, you guys can't meet Darth Vader because there's just especially at least in the old Star Wars game that was a D20 game. Again, it's so swingy that it's like there's a chance that it'll just punk out Vader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rodrigo, what IP game would you want to play?
What IP game would I want to play?
Yeah, RPG specifically, though.
Yeah.
Naked Lunch.
Say what? Oh, Naked
William
Lunch.
S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch. Yes.
Nice. I don't know. I just watched Pluto on Netflix, and I think like a serious, like, quote unquote, serious ass Astro Boy sounds like a really good setting.
Of the ones that are currently available, though.
Oh, okay. Of the ones that are currently available, God, it's just like I look at that Avatar: The Last Airbender system, and I'm like, I don't like this system.
Yeah, I've been looking at it recently too.
So it's like it feels terrible to say, but I've been getting into Pathfinder 2, and they just did like kineticists are just like pretty good benders.
Yeah, there you go.
But the stuff that's available, I'd be okay to get back into Star Wars. Probably, I'd be okay with playing in a Star Wars game.
All right.
Would you want to do like
Matthew?
the fantasy fight or the D20?
It doesn't matter. It's been long enough with the D20 that it'd be fine. But I've never played the Fantasy Flight game, so I'm curious about it.
Okay. Matthew, what about you? What are you going to say? MMPR?
Actually, I'm probably going to say Legion of Superheroes. Power Rangers is only interesting if, and I say this with nothing but respect.
You get to form the head. I want to form the head.
For you guys, my brothers in arms for the past 97 years of Critical Hit, I feel like if we played Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, we would not be playing the same team. I mean, it would be one of those things where I'd be playing the Car Ranger season and Rodrigo would be playing RPM and Brian would be doing his thing and Rob would be like, hey, I've decided I want to be Batman. And that's all cool and that's great. And that's what makes Batman. Critical Hit fun. But yeah, Power Rangers is one of those things where you got to have either five people on the same wavelength or a Zordon kicking us in the butt. And I would really rather be like a Legion of Superheroes game would be perfect because you can be like a weirdo wacko. You can be like, hi, I used to have a bubble for a head and my outfit is pink and you could call me Cosmic Boy. And then Steven could come in and go, I'm Timberwolf. I hate everybody. And
I'm so cool. On my planet, I say snick a lot.
Exactly. And then Brian can come in.
Not official members.
Yeah, exactly. Brian will be a substitute hero. Yeah. Rob will be Wildfire because he's a bag of energy.
Brian is actually all of the substitute heroes. He just plays a different character every.
Exactly. And then, of course, Rodrigo is Chief Zendak of the Science Police. So, we'll have a really great game.
I think I pitched you guys at one point. I said, if I was going to do Legion of Superhero games, here's what it would be. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, a long time ago.
I vaguely remember something.
Return to the Superboy planet.
Oh, yeah.
That would be the whole premise.
Because I have the perfect character. Meteor Attractor Boy. I can attract a meteor to my head. I can attract meteors. I make meteors crash to the ground. And I'm completely immune to all damage from meteors. Oh, otherwise, I'm squishy as hell. As long as I'm being crushed by a rock from space, I cannot be killed.
Do you have an IP currently out there that you're interested in playing?
The Turtles one. Brian actually started one up for us a few weeks ago that we need to move past character creation.
Actually using Mutants into Now, not the actual Palladium system.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I would be interested in looking at the Palladium one too. I
think they're just getting ready.
You think you would?
I look on my Twitter timeline. Hello, future people. It's probably over by now. No. But I just posted a tweet to their Kickstarter. I think today or yesterday, that they're doing for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reprint. I think it's just a reprint of the previous RPG.
Yeah, of the old 80s RPG. They basically compiled them into 2 books, all the supplements and everything, and it's $100 if you want them both, and there's no digital option, but it's still tempting to me.
Sure.
I'm not going to go for it then. All right, Brian, what about you?
Well, as you said, I was working on doing a, Mutants in the Now. Let me see, what's a good? I mean, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is interesting. I don't know if it'd be a good game, but I think we'd still have a lot of fun with it. I'm trying to think. Maybe if we could get a copy of the old Ghostbusters from Western Games.
I'm going to change my answer to was it a Cortex Leverage RPG?
Oh yeah, like a nice heisty game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my actual answer. I want to play a Leverage game.
I believe I have all that stuff digitally.
I want to play a Leverage. It's a Leverage.
Yeah. Okay, so Dintro asks, do you have any advice for wrapping up a campaign in a shorter amount of sessions than you initially thought? In my example, I was going to do 4 sessions or 4 seasons of play, but the game will have to end after the 3rd. How would you tackle a problem like that? I honestly don't think there's a problem.
You all died.
Yeah,
on your way back to your home planets.
I think that's the question is, how do you do that in a satisfying way if you have still stuff like some stuff that's still to be resolved,
right?
And the answer is try and come up with solutions to things that tackle multiple things at once, right? So if it's like, oh, well, the players have been trying to stop this kingdom from going to war, and also there's like a bunch of werewolves around, then figure out a way for the werewolves to stop the war, right? Like, and just make the players the linchpin that gets them to pull that off.
Mm-hmm. I guess the other, it's part of the question too, where you say a shorter amount of sessions than initially thought. In my example, I was going to do 4 seasons of play. Are you wanting to do 4 seasons or 4 sessions? If you're doing seasons, I honestly don't think that it matters if it has to end at the 3rd, providing that you follow the Justice League Unlimited theory of how you do a season. Every season ends with a big thing, and that is basically, if you go back and watch every season of the Justice League Unlimited, they treated it like there are no more seasons after this.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when they were renewed, so when they were renewed, they were like, oh, okay, great. We've got one more season to tell a story, and then we're going to end it, and we're going to treat it like that's the end. It doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger like Stranger Things has, or like, what's another one that's famously is not getting picked up again for another season?
Pirates of the Dark Water.
There you go. Where it's just like, you left us on a cliffhanger and it's never going to be resolved. So if you're setting up your seasons like that, it sounds like
canceled and we don't know who the father is.
Yeah, it sounds like you may have already gotten to the end of your 3rd and you don't know what to do, or you're almost to the end of your 3rd and you don't know what to do. But I would always treat each season like, that's it. You've done it. You've saved the world or whatever. Goodbye. And then, oh, by the way, here's another story for you. Rob, do you have an idea?
And even then, if you know it's your final season, or your final few sessions, like, I mean, I did this. It's okay to leave stuff open. Like, the characters do go on and have other adventures, right? Like, it doesn't have to be like everybody dies, or like that. This character is crowned king, and everybody goes off to the lands to the west. Like, it's okay. The world can keep going.
And never underestimate the power of the Animal House ending. The Senator and Mrs. John Blutarski. If you get to the end of that season and you know how those stories are going to end, or you know what the satisfying end point could be or should be, you can, give them that. You can give them the American Graffiti, and you can horrify people with, John Milner was killed in a drunk driving accident 20 minutes after this film ended. And then you can also give people those satisfying moments, because I feel like a lot of times in Critical Hit, my favorite, most memorable episodes are the things where we had to come up with something, or someone chose to come up with something. Like, in the middle of a moment, Rodrigo's like, we're just going to abstract this. And for a whole episode, we got the legend of Torque and the Kitty running around in the background. I always love remembering that, because it's one of those episodes that can never be tarnished. Because it's so abstract, most of it is in my head.
Sure.
And that's what works with you get to the end of that, go to Universal Studios and ask for Babs thing. it really does give you a lot of options to let people fill in those blanks and feel like they're getting satisfaction that you didn't necessarily build.
I prefer to call it the Poochie maneuver, where at the end of your season, you can just say, oh, you all died on the way back to your planet.
Mm-hmm,
the end.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, what were you going to suggest as a solution here?
I mean, the question is way open-ended on what they're asking. Like, what do you mean by 4 seasons? Why do you think it's going to be cutting short? Like,
I blame me.
Yeah, I always blame Steven.
I blame me. I mean, honestly, we started Critical Hit, and then we came up with this idea of seasons and off-season games, and then Critical Role picked up on it, and they started doing it, and then everybody else started doing it. And I think there's this thing that everybody thinks that you have to have a season of your story.
Yeah, de-influencerify your game.
Yeah, we've done a great job of that. That's why we didn't get to go to England and do a thing at in front of 50,000 people.
Yeah, that's right. That's
why literally zero
emphasized our
influence.
games,
and we like it that way.
I mean, I don't. I'd like to feed my family.
I mean, it's not even necessarily the seasons aspect of it. Like maybe he had 4 chapters of this story that they wanted to tell, but now for some reason they're not able to do that last chapter, and that's the question that I need or that's the information I need to answer the question. Why can't you do that 4th season? What is causing, like, did you move your story too fast and suddenly things went to the end before they were supposed to? Is someone having to leave now and you're not able to get to the end as quickly as you would have liked? Like, there's so many possibilities for what is the problem that I don't even know if we even touched upon them in everybody else's answers.
No,
Brainiac Rob does not
the problem itself. Yeah,
and that that is an important point, because as a game master, if this was happening to Rob, there would be a different thought process than what I would do or what Rodrigo would do. So you do also have to take into account your personal preferences, your personal style. If you are somebody who is going to be dissatisfied with any rushed ending, then you need to ask yourself, what elements of this am I comfortable rushing or ending or, preemptively doing whatever you need to do? And which of these things do I feel and do my players feel are absolutely essential? You get to the end of Preacher, and what's actually essential is that Cassidy dies, Tulip lives, and Jesse is a miserable bastard. That's literally all you need at the end of that story. Mm-hmm. So it does, kind of have to do with who you are, who they are, and most importantly, if you're doing a big, long season or if you're doing something very, very intense, it may be worth interviewing your players and finding out what they think is absolutely essential to an ending.
Spin Dizzy asks, what's the number one thing that gets you excited to play a new system? Brian?
New weird mechanics that I haven't experienced before.
Okay, Rob?
You answered my question, or you gave my answer by using Brian first.
It's a new system. Oh.
What's the thing that gets me excited? Brian.
Yeah, there you go. Rodrigo?
I do like interesting mechanics. Sometimes it's sometimes it'll be like a premise that is unlike other stuff that I've heard. Like Blades in the Dark, for example, has in having a much narrower focus, right? It's like this is a heist game, and this is a game that takes place in like this sort of world, as opposed to like your D&Ds or World of Darkness that are like, well, there's lots of different kinds of games that you can play in this, so the mechanics are more broad. Like nowadays, more focused games, which will almost always have interesting, more focused mechanics, pique my interest a lot more.
Matthew?
I have never in my life been excited to play a particular game system. I'm interested in, what archetypes, what characters, who are the other players? I'm always excited with this particular Gang of Idiots because I like going into, Pathfinder, never played it before. the Achtung Cthulhu system. Never played it before. I like going in here and seeing the things that just pop into the head of a Brian or a Rodrigo or somebody when you're like, hey, I have this whole new blank canvas and I get to paint my own thing on it. So I get excited about players. I was excited to have Steven DM again because Steven as DM is so just wonderfully exhilarating. He gets so excited. And, I almost
I wish you guys were here because you get to see me jump up and down and flail around when I'm doing my characters and things. It's great. Yeah. But
and that's the thing.
Nobody's together again anymore, and I have to sit in my lonely room by myself. Here's what.
Yeah, Rob's going to be in Kansas soon.
That's true. And I'm always
isn't available on those days.
I'm like 90 minutes away. You've literally come to my city and not told me and texted me afterward and said, "Hey, listen, I saw your building."
Because if I let people know that I'm in Topeka, then my mom expects me to come visit her. So there you go.
Oh yeah, that's
I can't let people. I don't let people know where I'm going.
Yeah, I'm just
nice, Rob. Okay, here's what gets me excited. The ease of use of the system. How easy is it to learn? Right? Because again, I don't want to have to buy 20 books or whatever to read 700 pages to figure out how your game plays. And then the setting. If the setting doesn't interest me and the system is too hard and complicated, then I have zero interest in that. Let's see. So we're almost out of time here. Anth says, does Brian still have a Pop-O-Matic D20?
Somewhere. I've moved.
Brian recently got married and moved, and he doesn't know where anything is.
Yeah.
What happens if you don't punch all Nazis? The answer is can be found in a Simpsons episode. It's when the school lets out and the history teacher runs after the kids, and he's like, "Wait, you haven't heard how World War II ended?" And everybody stops and goes, "We won!" And the kids are like, "Yay!" So regardless, we win. So, is there one game that you would all like to revisit? I wonder if that is a game like game system, like going back and doing another thing of what's the thing that we did with Haze of Shadows, using that system.
Haze of Shadows. I mean, there's Urban a second edition in the works that looks pretty sweet.
I would like to go back and revisit our Ghostbusters game that we did.
Oh yeah, the Inspectors.
Inspectors. Yeah, I like that one.
I would enjoy more Paladins and Dinosaurs.
Oh.
That was fun.
Sure.
I remember.
Yeah, I could always do that.
Yeah. Conversely to the more focused RPG, going back to Pathfinder 4th edition, as long as I'm not running it, because that part of my brain is cauterized. It's like when we at the end of the Weird Western game, we went around and were like, what other character would you, or what other thing would you have wanted to play? And I was like, yeah, I had like 3 other things that I would have been happy to play in that game. It just one of them kind of won out, and you just have to make a decision sometimes. But I always have a bunch of different things that I want to do. For this game, I pitched Steven basically 2 different characters, and I ended up going with one of them.
Rob.
I'd like to redo Urban Shadows. I would love to play 4th edition again. It's still my favorite version of D&D.
Sure.
Playing Pathfinder again, or even just moving on to Pathfinder 2 would be fun. I'm usually down to revisit just about anything. I think 5th edition is the only thing we've played on Critical Hit that I wouldn't want to do again.
And that's the other question. What is the one that you all have no interest in going back up to? So I'm going to count to 3. And when I hit 3, everybody just shout out the one system that you don't want to go back to. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Fifth edition.
Oh, really?
You didn't like Dust City Outlaws?
It was okay.
I think it definitely, that session suffered from being, I think, pretty hastily put together. I don't think I kind of don't feel like Dr. Will had the time to either.
I'm not blaming
have the
Dr.
time
Will.
within the game.
I just didn't find the system or the premise
Sure.
interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't actually remember much about the system, but we only played one session, so
Right. Yeah, I think
Right.
Brad does fine on
What
all
was
of his
that?
stuff.
yeah.
Was I
Dusk
there
City
for that?
Outlaws. It's this. No, I think it's a kind of like a semi-medieval heist game.
Yeah.
Finally, how important is the art in an RPG book for you?
For me,
Good art is really nice, but it's just more of a bonus than at all necessary as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Although I've definitely been part of many a Kickstarter where I mostly just read pre-finished Word documents of systems to figure them out.
Yeah, more and more for me, it's less important, and that's because I've really gone from playing with a book to playing on a computer. Even games that I would, dungeon like that I would game master with people there, I would bring my laptop and play out of that as opposed to bringing a book. So sometimes because of that, like art weirdly gets in the way of like you having the rules in front of you. And also more and more as I've been reading indie stuff, it's clear that, not everybody has this huge budget. And in fact, having to have this huge budget for like an art print book, right? Like a full color book with like a hardcover is impossible for some companies. And instead of trying to do that and then going under because those things don't sell enough, they should just try and get, smaller, cheaper books, maybe with not as much art, and just with like some key art, not key art as in, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
With some specific art, rather than trying to do like a fully illustrated smorgasbord of color.
I don't mind art in a book. I think it's great to add flavor or to give you an idea of what they're trying to do in this world of their RPG game. I think the problem arises, and Rodrigo just recently posted in this in one of either on the Twitter or in the Discord. I pick up 4th edition. I'm like, oh, look at these Eladrin, these snooty elf people. I know these from World of Warcraft. And based on the art and the illustration, that's what I locked in on. Oh, this is the way they're supposed to look and act and do all these things based on the art. And Rodrigo's like, I didn't want you to do that at all. But whatever. So I think that there is the problem
genesis. Yeah, totally. But the genesis of our 4th edition campaign was definitely like your enthusiasm for it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was very much willing to throw my ideas away to just make sure that we were able to like maintain that through line for apparently 10 years.
Brian or Rob or Matthew, I guess you haven't waited.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to be contrarian because I'm not, the guy who goes and reads games and buys games. I feel like for me, historically, going back in the 80s, really good art is kind of essential because in a lot of ways it tells you what the game.
Yeah, what the heck? What's a lich?
Right, but what they expect,
Yeah,
right.
When you go into like the Villains and Vigilantes, the first Villains and Vigilantes module literally gives you the elementals. And if you go in there and you look at the art as opposed to the story, the art kind of says something entirely different than what you might get from just reading Death Duel with the Destroyers. And that was my favorite part. And also, we would go through our books and add little word balloons and things. And so you could tell whose book it was by whose snotty language was coming out of Elminster's mouth. So you do have that point of, I cannot see anything ever drawn by Jeff D and not see the Marvel RPG of the 80s. So
yeah,
you do have that point where, especially for me as a comic nerd, that art is kind of important in that it tells you something about the expectations of the creator.
Yeah.
Brian?
It's like the old Planescape books that are all done by like the same person by like Terlizzi,
Mm-hmm.
or actually Pathfinder. So much of Pathfinder is done by Wayne Reynolds that's kind of what Pathfinder.
Example.
Yeah, that's what Pathfinder tastes like, right? It's like spiky shoulder pads and like perfectly spherical boobs.
When did you meet my
Brahms
wife?
art from Dark Sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, again, great art is awesome to have as a bonus, but if a game doesn't have it, that's fine. I'm there for the rules or the setting.
Yeah, Rob.
I feel like making sure it's not bad art is way more important.
Yeah.
Like bad art is going to push me away from the game way quicker than good art is going to draw me in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the liking of art is so subjective, but I see where you're coming from, because back in the AD&D days, I loved going and just buying the Fiend Folio or, whatever book that they had, because I was like, oh, look at all this cool art. But then I go back and look at it today, I'm like, this art is okay, but it's not that great, kind of thing. And it kind of is a turnoff now. So I see where you're coming from on that, Rob. But I also realize it's kind of subjective too. Yeah,
obviously, any art's going to be subjective, but there's some points where it's like, nah, this is so just not.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is actually like Exalted Third Edition. Exalted Third Edition has a lot of like kind of bad unfinished art in it, and it's just because the whole production of that book was so chaotic, to the point where like some of like they like ended up with some like tracing stuff that people turned in on the book, and it was like kind of a scandal. And just like I would like, if Exalted Third Edition was my first introduction to Exalted and I was flipping through that book the way that I did with the first edition and I was like really interested in it, I might not have done it, because there's a lot of like so to like art that might have been better if it had actually like been given like a second pass. Yeah, it can definitely be a turnoff. All
right, Brian, how do you feel about one-page RPGs?
They can definitely be interesting. They're, as Rodrigo was kind of saying about, games that have like a narrow focus. I mean, with one-page RPGs, you have to have like just a needle-fine focus on what you want the game to be. And I got like a whole book of one-page RPGs, and they're just fun to read and just see what kind of weird ideas they throw against the wall there.
Rob, how do you feel about one-page RPGs?
They could be fun. I've not actually played around with any that I'm aware of.
Okay. I've seen a couple of them and I've read through them. I think the closest to a single-page RPG is the what the heck was the one where we were the spaceship smuggler people? Disaster? No, not Disaster. What did you say?
Fiasco.
Oh, Fiasco. Fiasco is probably as close to a one-page RPG that I've gotten, I think. And I think that was only like 2 or 3 pages.
Sure. I mean, the whole rule book's fairly big sized, but yeah, the rules could be fitted on a pretty small.
Yeah. Anybody else have any strong feelings for or against one-page RPGs?
I don't know what that is.
So
the entire game is on one page.
Yeah, you can fit the entirety of the RPG into a single page. And I find that one-page RPGs or like business card RPGs or whatever, the thing that's like, they are a good exercise. And sometimes just by flipping through and reading those, you can either be like, oh, I really want to play this game, or this actually like gives me an idea. Like this, like the way that somebody essentialized this into like this single thing is like kind of breaks your expectation of how an RPG needs to work, of what sort of stats you need to care about, of what sort of themes you need to care about. It's like it's definitely an exercise in doing stuff. I've written like RPGs on Twitter, where I'm like, when people were like complaining about the Marvel RPG, I wrote a whole new Marvel RPG on Twitter. So I've done stuff like that, and it's fun and it's interesting. So yeah, definitely if you've never looked into one-page RPGs and you enjoy the medium of role-playing games, give them a look because again, I feel like they will really like jar you out of what you think is essential to an RPG is actually sometimes just tradition or sometimes just a structure that helps but isn't actually necessary.
Here's this is from a Game Rant article. Crash Pandas. When one pictures illegal street racing in Los Angeles, they probably don't picture raccoons. Crash Pandas exists to correct this error. A game based on raccoon street racers is inherently a fun idea for one obvious reasons. Raccoons are terrible drivers. Better yet, all of the raccoons are driving the same car. Players secretly decide whether to brake, turn, accelerate, or take another action. Only then are their collective decisions revealed and resolved. Crash Pandas is the purest kind of nonsense, recommended for anyone with a strong, whimsical streak. And I've put a link there in the chat for you guys to like Adventure Skeletons, which did McElroy's run a Adventure Skeletons game not too long ago, Brian?
I haven't gotten to it yet.
For some reason, I want to say that they ran Adventure Skeletons. But yeah, these are really short little things that are pretty straightforward. I don't know, for those of you that have played a one-page RPG, are these ones that have any kind of like difficult mechanic that you have to understand? Or I think it's all on that one page, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all on that one page.
Yeah, they're usually pretty simple. Like probably like one of the best known examples is Laser and Feelings, where you have just like 2 stats and it's been like reflavored to all kinds of things like Honey Heist. So like Laser and Feelings, you have a laser stat and a feeling stat, and basically you roll, and depending on which one you're rolling, you're trying to roll up or above or below that number. And yeah, it's just super simple on a D6.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Our mailbag episode for this decade. If you have any, I'm sure we'll do this again. It's always fun to do this.
2035, kids.
I mean, honestly, the reason why we haven't done a mailbag in so long is because we were doing main games, and honestly, there's not a lot of people that write to us at our email anymore, podcast@majorspoilers.com. But we do have a Discord. And we have a critical hit channel. And in that critical hit channel, I've created a thread called Mailbag, where you can go in and ask your questions. And as your questions start to build up, then we will answer them in a future episode. So join our Discord server absolutely free if you haven't already. A lot of welcoming, happy people. Some of them are shining. And you can go in and get involved in an upcoming mailbag. But we've also been, having fun playing games because our time is at a premium. It's not like when Brian and Rob were still in college and, they had their nights free. Everybody's got busy lives now. So we try to make use of our time together. And it's always fun with each of you. And our listeners as well. I'm being serious. Don't laugh, you horrible person. I mean, person.
30 years, Stephen. I just sometimes I sit here and I'm like, do you smell sarcasm?
I'm being dead serious.
All of you wonderful people.
All of you wonderful people. I do. I think you're all wonderful people.
Hey,
until you
kids.
snicker, and then you
turn into Krusty the Clown.
Then you're just a slightly joyful person. All right. I think that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for checking out our mailbag. And don't forget to head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/majorspoilers, so that we can ensure that we can get together more often and play our games for you. Also, at the gold level, that's $10 a month. Then you get access to the GM Roundtable, where if you are wondering what's going on in Steven's mind as he's building up these games, that's what the GM Roundtable is all about right now. It's what's the upcoming session that these guys are going to play? What are the pros and cons of what I have set out? What are things that I should change? And basically tips on being a better game master for the players. So I think it's enjoyable. It's very insightful. It's very spoilery. So do be aware of that. So in case you're like, I don't want to know what Steven has planned when they go into the deep, dark woods, then you probably don't want to be part of the GM Roundtable. But definitely your contributions help with everything we do at Major Spoilers. So patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Thank you so much, and we will see you again very soon. I forgot how we end this thing. Here's hoping all of your dice rolls are critical hits.
This podcast is copyright 2023 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.